The date is November 15th, 1966. You are driving alone on a West Virginian country road with nothing but the headlights of your vehicle to light your way in front of you. Suddenly, there is the sound of a great noise. You pause and slam your foot on the brakes, trying to see what has caused this, only to see something peering back at you through the windshield. You see a massive pair of alien eyes connected to feathery wings, but just as soon as this creature has appeared, there is the sound of beating wings, and it is gone as quickly as it arrived. Though you don't know exactly what happened, you know one thing for certain. You've just had your first encounter with the paranormal. Now, that was allegedly a real event that supposedly happened to 4 teenagers in the middle of West Virginia in the 1960s. Little did they know that their tall tale would, through a series of domino-like effects, go on to create one of the most notorious and culturally impactful cryptids in American history, the Mothman. Now, ever since I was a kid, I have been fascinated with monsters and the like, and I think there's something irreverent to their study. It's important for us to occasionally look in the weird and unexplained things in our history in order to keep the pursuit of knowledge fresh. And so that's what I'm going to be doing today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Mothman, of all things. And throughout the course of this speech, I hope to present you with the full history of how the Mothman came to be, how it rose to popularity, and hopefully give you just enough to make conclusions of its validity for yourself. So, this is the Mothman. Now, the first sighting occurs on November 15th, 1966. 4 teenagers, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Stephen and Mary Millette, are driving alone on a West Virginia country road in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where they claim to have encountered a strange avian entity while out on the roads. This entity was reportedly 6 to 7 feet tall with a 10-foot wingspan and glowing red eyes. Now, today we hear a story like this and we brush it off out of hand. But this is the 1960s, and people take this sort of thing a lot more seriously, especially after Scarberry's quote in the local newspaper saying, "If I had seen it while by myself, I wouldn't have said anything. But there were 4 of us who saw it." That kind of quote adds credibility to his statement. So more and more people begin to take this seriously. The official channels need an official response. And so just a few days later, through the Huntington Herald-Dispatch, Dr. Robert L. Smith, who is a professor of wildlife biology at the University of West Virginia, wants to come out with his own explanation for the Mothman. Specifically, he says it's a bird. And more specifically than that, he says it's the sandhill crane, which is a good candidate for a few reasons. Firstly, it's big. Secondly, it's somewhat from the area. And finally, it has characteristic red feathers around the eyes, which could be mistaken for glowing eyes. Some people buy this explanation, but many don't, especially not after a few days later when the creature is reportedly sighted again, this time by a man named Tom Urey. Now, Tom is driving alone when he claims to encounter a very familiar sounding creature, again, 6 feet tall with giant wings. And it's at this point that the people of Point Pleasant begin to make some interesting connections. They find the similarities between Scarberry and Urey's report cohesive, and meanwhile find the sandhill crane to be a lacking explanation. The bird is too small, it doesn't fly fast enough for the reports, and more importantly, has never been sighted in the area of Point Pleasant at the time of the story. So what do the people of Point Pleasant conclude? They conclude that there's a monster in the woods. And so for the next few months, we see a rise of witch hunts as more and more people try and prove this creature's existence, until the moment that would elevate the Mothman from a simple local legend into a cultural phenomenon. And that is the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Now, the Silver Bridge collapse is a real event. It is the most deadly bridge crash in US history to date. 46 people lose their lives to this collapse. The official cause of the break is an 1/8 of an inch fracture on a supportive eye bar, which eventually, through time, supposedly caused the bridge to collapse. Most people buy this again, but those people are not John A. Keel. John A. Keel is a paranormal investigator in the area at the time, and he starts putting together some very interesting connections about the whole thing. Firstly, he finds an anonymous citizen's report reporting that the Mothman was sighted at the Silver Bridge just a day before the bridge collapsed. And secondly, he finds a letter from his associate, Mary Heyer, who claims to have had dreams the month before about people falling off a bridge and into the freezing river. Then he concludes that the collapse of the bridge happens to the day 13 months after the first Mothman sighting. And we all know that 13 is an unlucky number. So John A. Keel puts all these things together and he comes to the only logical conclusion that the Mothman sunk the bridge. It's important to remember that these are real people that did get hurt, but it's also important to know that this is a thing a non-insignificant amount of people believe. And from there, the rest is history. The Mothman gets its name from pulpy kind of comic fiction heroes at the time like Batman. John A. Keel publishes a book called The Mothman Prophecies, which is just a capsule of all of his conspiracies, and it rockets the myth into popularity. It eventually gets adapted into that 2002 film on the right, and today there's even a Mothman festival in Point Pleasant that is a huge tourist attraction every year. So now we come to the point where you might be asking yourself, why did I tell you all of this? I think it's important. I think it's important to every once in a while try and give the benefit of the doubt to the strange things in our history, if not for just entertainment's sake. And so tonight, I will leave you with this. Which do you think is more likely? Do you think that 4 teenagers made up a ghost story to get their 15 seconds of fame, if even? Or do you find it more likely that 4 people simply saw something in the woods that terrified them? Something bizarre, utterly otherworldly.